So it's left to men like Davis Younts to fight.
Lawyer R. Davis Younts says by doing this, the military may have violated the constitutional rights.
Who has successfully defended naval officers.
All right, joining us now to discuss military defense attorney Davis Younts. Davis, welcome back. Thanks for being here tonight. The irony of all this, good evening to you. It's the same government, Iran, that murdered 22-year-old Masha Amini. They're going to chair the Human Rights Forum of the UN? Are you kidding me? This is not a drill. This is actually happening. What are they thinking at the UN?
Listen, this completely undermines the credibility of the UN to the extent the UN had much credibility left in the world. This is a joke. Iran is not only the leading state sponsor of terror throughout the world. Their own record on violence and the persecution of dissidents and religious minorities is tragic. It's appalling. I mean, this is coming while Iran is actively providing money and resources to terrorists that are attacking Israel, that are killing civilians in Israel, that just precipitated one of the most devastating terrorist attacks on any nation in modern history. I mean, all of this is not only contrary to what the UN Charter says it's supposed to be about, but this is not a nation with human rights records. In addition to everything else you have put forward, the focus of this Human Rights Forum for this time frame is supposed to be on the use of technology and social media to further human rights throughout the world. Iran just executed 2 men. They hung them publicly because they made criticism of the state religion on social media. That's the kind of hypocrisy we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's laughable to think that they are in the right with this, that they think this is a good decision, and members of the UN alike looking at this, not disavowing it, not opposing it in any such way. I mean, we know the UN is like deeply anti-Semitic. We've seen this for years and years and years. Nikki Haley was like one of the people to actually stand up to them at her time as UN ambassador. But, you know, nonetheless, the timing of all of this is really something, isn't it, Davis? You know, critics of the UN, and we have Congressman Andy Biggs, also Congresswoman Senator Marsha Blackburn, questioning why the United States, why are they supporting the United Nations with so much of our taxpayer money? And I was curious to see, what is the actual figure that we are sending to the UN? So I looked it up. On average, Davis, $12.5 billion each year. We are one of the largest, if not the largest, donors to them. Why are we still funding this establishment that's going to chair Iran as the member of human rights violations, as you just said, hung 2 guys for just, I don't know, opposing the government's word or religion or having any type of like freedom of expression that doesn't exist? Human rights, like for real.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. Listen, the United States provides almost 25% of the money that flows to the UN is provided by the United States. So by continuing to provide, so not only are we participating in an organization that allows them to have a voice, but we are allowing Iran to chair this forum and to be responsible for this. It's immoral, it's unjust, it's not right. And again, the United States, that number, that $12.5 billion, that was after Trump made efforts to actually reduce the amount of money that the United States was providing to the United Nations. I suspect when the numbers are actually available, the amount provided in 2022 is going to be significantly higher than that. And much of that is voluntary. In other words, that's the United States going above and beyond the assessment they're given and actually donating more. And that is aside from the fact that these nations like Iran are given support through the International Monetary Fund that's not even tracked. And if the Biden administration continues their current policy, they'll continue to funnel them money through the International Monetary Fund that Congress isn't even aware of because it's under the monetary amounts that they're required to report to Congress. So this is a huge, significant issue. And I agree, we need to be asking a question fundamentally. Is it in the United States' best interest to continue to fund the UN? And is it even moral and ethical if this is the kind of nation that's going to be allowed to chair a human rights forum?
Yeah. What are your point about Iran? Because you know a lot about them, and you know they have networks that span along a large swath of the Middle East. You have Hamas in Gaza, you have Hezbollah in Lebanon, you have the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Now, without Iran, we don't know how much funding these terror proxy groups are getting. You know what else they're doing? They're using their proxies to launch strikes aimed at U.S. military bases, our own guys, our own people on the ground in Iraq and Syria right now. Of course, they're never going to come out and claim responsibility. They would rather walk this tightrope and avoid direct confrontation. So on that note, Davis, how should the U.S. government respond to Iran's indirect involvement in this war going on in Israel right now?
The number one priority should be to stop funding Iran. We should stop sending any type of support. We should stop releasing any money to Iran. And this goes beyond just the $6 billion that was supposed to be humanitarian aid that's supposedly frozen right now. This is the whole point. There are numerous ways the Biden administration is funneling resources and money to Iran. And we can call it humanitarian aid or other things, but it's going to a corrupt and evil government that is going to use it to fund terrorism. It's a Shiite nation. It is funding all of these groups. When you hear the Houthis in Yemen, when you hear Hezbollah, when you hear Hamas, just know and understand they are coordinated by Iran, and through the Quds forces. That's who these individuals are. That's what they represent. And even the group in Iraq that's taking responsibility for attacking American installations, targeting Americans and American service members in Iraq, they're not really hiding their ties to Iran. They are part of Quds forces. That's who trains them. That's who funnels them resources.
So, Davis, you know this, I know this, the top intel agencies know this, that when we give them money, that when you give people like Gaza money, thinking it's going to go to some type of humanitarian relief or aid, when we all know that it's not actually going to all be dispersed to just them and that there is this off chance that Hamas is going to take control of that money and divvy it up wherever they see fit, you know, probably the terrorist tunnels underground right now and other artillery weapons. If we know all this, why even take the risk sending them money to begin with?
You know, it's difficult to understand that. But again, I think we have political leaders that are so enmeshed in things like their reputation in the international community or their desire to appear, as if they are national players, that they forget that peace comes through strength and that we should be putting America first. And again, Trump did make significant efforts to defund and reduce funding to the UN. It was a very difficult battle for him to fight. And the Biden administration has gone all in supporting the UN and ignoring the corruption that's present there. We will never know or understand the backroom deals that are made within a corrupt organization like the UN. And we can spend a lot of time talking about that and those policy things. We can say the UN Charter is laudable, but we know the UN is corrupt. We know that these leaders that are given a voice there are corrupt, and we know that backroom deals are made. We should not be a part of that.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head every time. Trump, while he's campaigning right now for president next year, I think that he should really hit that in light of everything going on. I think that would resonate very well with a lot of voters and people watching this war, take off from afar, because we need strong leadership. And, being the president that took out the Iranian general, I mean, I'm going to, place my best bet with him over our current leader now, Davis. So it's not just Iran funding these proxies. So we see involvement from other countries as well. And they're taking this indirect approach against Israel also. Just yesterday, two Chinese companies, Baidu, which is like the Google of China, and then Alibaba, which is the Amazon of China, they wiped Israel off its online digital map. So if you search for a product, let's say Jerusalem, it's not going to say Jerusalem, Israel. It's going to say Jerusalem, Palestine. And it's kind of funny looking at, the little breadcrumbs left behind of who these companies countries are in cahoots with. China is Iran's largest trading partner. Now you're seeing that this war abroad, it's spurring more enemies. Where do you see this going with the other countries indirectly getting involved? Are we somewhere on the verge of World War III with all this?
I think we have to be very, very concerned about escalation. And one of the things we have to recognize, and this goes in part to my religious faith, but as a Christian, we understand fundamentally something about just war and otherwise. But when we're dealing with a communist country like China, this is a country that has adopted atheism and secular humanism as their worldview. And so for them to be anti-Semitic, or for them to not have any concern at all for the existence of the nation of Israel if it doesn't serve their interests, we shouldn't be surprised by that. They're more motivated by Darwinian evolutionary ethics of survival of the fittest than they are anything else. So if there's a monetary benefit towards China. If they believe it's in their best interest to escalate this and fund resources to Iran to target Israel, if they think the timing is right for an escalation, we need to be very, very wary of that, because they will continue to act in accordance with what they believe is there. And the United States should be continuing to go back to a proper moral and ethical theory of just war. We should be acting to protect American citizens, and part of that is securing our border. You haven't asked me about that, but listen, these resources are going to groups that will want to infiltrate the southern border, and they could carry out attacks like this. And if we do not get serious about securing the border, that's the bottom line. And if there is an attack on U.S. soil, like what happened in Israel, because we haven't secured our border, that will lead to an escalation. We'll be forced to respond in a very forceful way, and that is going to be devastating to the world. I hope it doesn't go there, but that is one of my primary concerns as we look at policy, as we look at military policy. We have an unsecure border, and we have enemies all over the world that are seeking to exploit that border.
Yeah, people tend to forget, Davis, that these groups, these terror groups, they're not just calling for the death of Israel, they're calling for the death of the Western civilization, us, the United States of America. And they make no secret about it. They say this in broad daylight, in plain sight. If they're not coming after Israel, they want to come after us. We are two of the same, and that's why Israel is our biggest ally. People keep forgetting that. Speaking of our own borders, because you did mention that, it was just last year that DHS located terrorist people trying to cross the border from 60 different countries. We have all this information, yet they're doing no type of moves or something in the works to tighten our borders, when we know that there is the greatest threat right now in our homeland, which is down south between Mexico and the United States. And you see what's happening in Israel, and it's exactly why a strong border matters. Davis, all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming on.